The last frost in Lancaster County comes somewhere in the middle of April in most years. I am planting 2 full months before that. Kale, spinach, lettuce, onion sets, early brassicas, all of it going into cold ground while my neighbors are still waiting for the calendar to tell them it is safe. The difference between my first harvest and theirs is not a better seed or a warmer corner of the garden. It is a frame made of pine and plastic conduit that cost me less than $25 to build and opens with one hand in under 10 seconds. I have been using variations of this same structure for 30 years and it has never once let me or the garden down. I am going to show you how to build a hinged hoop house for a raised bed the way we have always done it here in Lancaster County. When you are done, you will have a structure that extends your growing season by 6 to 8 weeks on either end, protects your plants from late frost, holds heat through cold nights, and opens and closes in a single motion without ever removing it from the bed or moving it across the garden. The hinge is the part most people skip. It is the part that makes everything else worth doing. I am Levi Yoder. I was raised here in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, where we grow food on a serious schedule, because food is serious, and the ground is only open for so long. My grandfather built the first hoop house frame I ever saw. He used it on a 4x8 raised bed in the kitchen garden for as long as I can remember, and the first warm kale I ever ate in February came out from under a piece of plastic, not very different from what I am about to show you how to build. Before I show you, let me say this plainly. If you want the full collection of the old homestead methods that were handed down in our family, from the garden and orchard to the pantry, cellar, and the everyday keeping of a house, I have gathered them into one simple ebook. You will find it in the description below. Now, let us get back to the topic. Here is what the hinged hoop house does that a plain plastic drape does not. A drape over a raised bed will keep the frost off. That is its whole job, and it does it. But every time you want to water, weed, harvest, or check on the plants, you lift the whole thing off, set it somewhere, do your work, and then fight the plastic back on in the wind with cold hands. In a week of this, the plastic is torn. In a month, you have started leaving it off altogether, and your plants are on their own. The hinge changes everything. You lift one side, prop it with a stick, do your work, and let it back down. 10 seconds, one motion. The structure is protecting the bed again before you walk away. A hoop house you can open in 10 seconds is one you actually open. That is the whole point. Here's what you need. For a standard 4x8 raised bed, 8 pieces of 1/2-inch PVC or electrical conduit, each 5 feet long, for the hoops. 4 pieces of 1x2 pine, 2 cut to 4 feet and 2 cut to 8 feet, for the frame rails. 1 roll of 6 mil clear plastic sheeting. 4 to 6 basic butt hinges with their screws. A handful of 1.5-inch wood screws. A staple gun with staples and a drill. That is the complete list. Total cost runs between $15 and $30 depending on what you already have on hand. The conduit and the plastic are the main expense. Everything else is what most workshops already carry. Before you cut anything, understand what you are building. The hoop house is 2 frames, a bottom frame and a top frame, joined along one long side by hinges. Each frame is a simple rectangle of 1x2 rails with conduit bent across it at intervals to create the arch. The bottom frame sits on top of the raised bed walls on both long sides. The top frame sits on top of it, hinged along one long side, with the plastic stapled to it. To open the hoop house, you lift the top frame from the unhinged side, prop it with your stick, and work in the bed from that open side. To close it, you lower the top frame back down. Simple, repeatable, and it works the same way on the first day of February as it does on the last day of October. Start with the conduit. Cut 8 5-foot lengths with a hacksaw, about 20 seconds per cut. You will also need 8 6-inch pieces of 1/2-inch rebar or wooden dowel, 1 for each hoop leg. These anchor the hoops in place. You hammer each short stake into the soil just inside the raised bed wall, and the conduit leg slips over it and holds without any fastener. The hoop cannot fall inward or outward. It lifts straight up and nothing else. This is the anchoring method my grandfather used, and I have never found a simpler one. Lay your bottom frame rails out on the ground, the 4-foot and 8-foot pieces forming the rectangle. Drill pilot holes and join the corners with wood screws. Do the same for the top frame, keeping the corners square as you work. Now hold one piece of conduit and bend it gently from one long rail of the bottom frame to the other, so the arch spans the width. Mark where each leg touches the inside face of the rail and drill a hole at each mark, just wide enough for the conduit to pass through. Do this for all 4 hoop positions, spaced evenly every 2 feet along the frame. Slip each conduit leg through its hole so the arch rises above the frame and the leg hangs below, ready to be inserted over the rebar stake when you set the frame on the bed. Repeat for the top frame at the same positions so the arches of both frames line up when they close together. Now the hinges. Lay both frames side by side, face up, with the long sides that will be joined touching each other flat. Space 4 hinges evenly along this joint, 1 near each end and 2 between. Attach each hinge to the top face of the bottom frame rail and the matching top face of the top frame rail so that when you lift the top frame from the far side, it pivots cleanly on these points. Before you go further, test the motion. The top frame should swing up without binding anywhere. If it catches, find the hinge and adjust it. This is the moment to fix that problem, not after the plastic is stapled on. Now the plastic. Cut the sheeting to cover the top frame with several inches of overhang on all 4 sides. Stretch it taut over the arches and staple it to the 1x2 rails, starting at the center of one long side and working out toward the ends, keeping the surface smooth as you go. Fold the corners like a fitted bedsheet and staple them flat. The plastic needs to be taut enough that water runs off rather than pooling, which would add weight and eventually tear the material. Once stapled, the top frame with its arched conduit and stretched plastic is the cover of the hoop house. The bottom frame is the base it rides on. To install it, set the bottom frame on top of the raised bed walls on both long sides, level and stable. Hammer the rebar stakes just inside the walls at the corners and midpoints, so the conduit legs of the bottom frame slip over them. No screws through the bed walls. No permanent attachment. The hoop house is anchored against wind but lifts free at the end of the season and stores flat against the barn or fence. Set the top frame down onto the bottom frame with the hinged side aligned and the hoop house is in place. The whole installation takes about 10 minutes. Cut your prop stick from any straight scrap lumber. Cut it to hold the top frame open at a comfortable working height, somewhere between 18 and 24 inches depending on how tall your arches run. Cut a small notch into one end so it grips the frame rail and does not slip while you are working inside the bed. Hang it on the hinge side of the top frame when it is not in use. It is always there when you need it. That is the detail most people skip, and then spend 5 minutes hunting for a stick every time they want to open the thing. A few things worth knowing before you build. This design scales to any rectangular bed. A 4x12 gets 2 more hoops per frame and 2 more hinges. A 4x16 gets 4 more hoops and 3 more hinges. Clear plastic lets in more light than row cover fabric and warms the interior better on sunny days, which matters most in the early weeks when the sun is still low. In high summer, the structure comes off entirely and stores flat. It weighs almost nothing. When fall comes and the nights start dropping again, it goes back on. I have used the same frames for 7 years on some beds. The plastic needs replacing every 2 or 3 seasons. The frames last as long as you keep them out of the weather. The thing I want you to hold on to above everything else in this video is why the hinge matters so much. Every structure that requires real effort to open will eventually stay closed. That is not laziness. It is how people actually work alongside their gardens through a busy season. Every structure you can open with one hand, while your other hand is full, will get opened when it needs to be. My grandfather understood this without ever putting a name to it. He built things so that the right behavior required no effort beyond the task itself. The hinge on this hoop house is not a convenience. It is the difference between a structure that works for one enthusiastic week in April and one that works for 7 months of the year. Tell me in the comments what you are planning to grow under yours first this season, and tell me your county and your state while you are there. The growing calendar runs very differently in Georgia than it does in Minnesota, and I always want to know what the season looks like for who is out there. I read every single one. Next time I am going to show you how my grandfather laid out the kitchen garden on a 1/4 acre to feed a family of 9 through a full year with almost nothing purchased from outside. The rotation he used, the spacing he kept, the crops he never let himself run out of, and the things he always grew more of than he needed because they were the ones that held longest in the cellar. A garden that actually keeps a family fed through a full year is a different project from a garden that produces a good summer harvest, and the difference is almost entirely in how it is planned before the first seed goes in. Most people never do that planning at all. My grandfather never once skipped it. The people who built this country with their own two hands knew things we are only just now starting to truly remember.